Okay, well, welcome everyone. Shabbat Shalom. And
Shalom.
Shalom.
good to see everyone. So Hanukkah is right, I would say, around the corner. And we're going to talk all about Hanukkah today on a number of different levels and fronts. And why don't we begin first with our bracha for Torah study. And just as a side comment, remember, at least in my training, we would use the word Torah in two different ways. The traditional manner of Torah with a capital T, referring specifically to the 5 books of Moses and various ideas about the origin of that, but all reflecting this idea, Torah mi Sinai, that from Sinai, some awareness of God's mind became revealed in a moment of revelation at Sinai, and that, according to Pirkei Avot, the very beginning, the opening lines of Pirkei Avot, has been passed down through the generations right now to the present, and has been interpreted and reinterpreted and will be so in perpetuity. But there's another idea of Torah as well, and for lack of a better way to describe it, it's Torah with a small t. And Torah with a small t is kind of a euphemism for the corpus of Jewish knowledge that has been developed, revealed, remembered over the course of history. And so we could say when we study Midrash, we're studying Torah with a small t. When we're studying other texts, we're studying Torah with a small t. And there is a stream of thought in terms of concepts of Jewish history that suggests that on Sinai, not just Torah with a capital T, the 5 books of Moses were revealed, but Torah with a small t. All Jewish knowledge was revealed. Part of this interpretation is rooted in a very Hellenistic idea called the theory of recollection, which is the notion that before birth, according to the Greeks, or some Greek thinkers, early Greek thinkers, all knowledge would be revealed to a person before they were born, and then birth would, in a sense, mask all that knowledge, and that living, the course of a lifetime would be, as you go through life, you recollect this knowledge that was placed before you before birth. And there are some streams of Jewish thought that in some sense utilize this Hellenistic construct, so that Torah with a small t is the corpus of Jewish knowledge revealed at Sinai. And that's why in later generations, let's say, when the Talmud eventually is composed, the Mishnah is composed, prior to that, the Gemara, or commentaries throughout history, rather than those being sort of strictly novel commentaries from their time and place, they can be understood in the minds of some thinkers as having all been revealed at Sinai, but it wasn't until the 1800s that it was remembered and then brought back out into the world. So I mention that because today we're going to look at a variety of aspects of Hanukkah, things you already know for sure, but it's always good to review them and discuss them. And we're going to look at also some primary texts related to Hanukkah as well. So if you are ready, let's say the bracha. It's la'asok b'divrei Torah, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, O God, who has sanctified us through commandments and commands us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. All right. So you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. So first, I want to clear something up with everybody when we talk about Hanukkah. How are we supposed to spell it, for goodness sake? Because that has certainly been an interesting phenomenon, and you've seen it spelled many ways. Hanukkah, 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 and there's so many spellings. And just think about transliteration, the process of how we turn Hebrew transliterated into English letters and symbols. And the fact is, transliteration is always a fluid process, but there are some scholarly standards which indicate that the spelling of Hanukkah, and you'll notice I have a little dot under the H, and in scholarly settings, they will use that to represent the ch of the chet. Now, in earlier forms of English transliteration of Hebrew, they represented the with a ch, but that can be very misleading, and for people with no knowledge of Hebrew, they inevitably always call it Chanukah. And so we're going to step aside from Chanukah, and we're going to use the actual scholarly methodology, which is H with a dot under it represents the chet over here in the Hebrew. And then there's the nun, nu, and the U is for the vav and the sound, u. The key, very interesting in ancient Hebrew and the evolution of the Hebrew language, when we have a letter like a kaf right here, and there's a dot inside, there is a lot of scholarly evidence that in earlier forms of the Hebrew language, that represented a double letter. The dot represents a double letter. And so that's why a true scholarly transliteration has two Ks, because the kaf with the dot in it suggests a double letter. So you'd think, oh, such a lesson for what? What? Look at, you see what Jews are capable of. We can bring it, down into the weeds as deeply as we choose. And this is a little in the weeds, but I think it's interesting that, of course, Hebrew is our primary language. But we operate in an English-speaking environment. And I've always gotten a chuckle out of the fact that there are so many different popular spellings of the word Hanukkah. So that's just my offering about what would be the most authentic transliteration and spelling. And this happens to be the one that I gravitate to and utilize in my writing, at least at this point. Now, let's just remember, Hanukkah is a non-biblical holiday. It's not one of the high holidays of the fall. It's not one of the Chagim, the three pilgrimage festivals. It has no reference to a holy convocation, which is what is often associated most of all with biblical celebrations, which means it is observed like a Sabbath with no servile work. The 39 categories of work on Shabbat apply whenever you see that term holy convocation of activities that are forbidden. Rather, it is an historical holiday. Some will call it a minor holiday, as opposed to the holidays with holy convocation. But I happen to believe Hanukkah is still very meaningful, and I believe extremely important. There's also this interesting tension that goes on. I have always felt that there's an element of Jewish history as we've evolved as a people that hasn't always been inwardly generated, let's put it that way, that some of our evolution as a people has clearly been in reaction to the outside world. And Hanukkah is a very interesting example of this, because as we're going to see, and as you already know, Hanukkah is steeped in actual history and traditional legend and lore. And yet in the 20th century, it became connected to the Christmas rush of commercialism. And that creates an interesting kind of tension, I think, for Jews. On the one hand, Hanukkah can be important and meaningful, but on the other hand, Hanukkah's been a little co-opted by seasonal commercialism. And how one feels about that is interesting to just take a personal measure. Just something to start with. So I'm going to review this now. It's what you know, but I want to review it because, and I've written it out so you can follow. Maybe what we'll do is I know this is like the way we used to learn in Hebrew school, and we used to hate this, but I do think it's good to read together. And it's just a succinct description of the history behind Hanukkah. It's a story of the few overcoming the many, a tale of beating the odds, a saga of resistance, a testimony to the tenacious spirit of the Jewish people. And would someone like to read aloud the first paragraph?
Sure. When the Syrian Greeks advanced into Israel in the 2nd century BCE, their intention was to assimilate all the Jews into Hellenistic culture. There were some Jews at that time that welcomed the fresh and interesting aspects of Greek culture, and there were those Jews who vigilantly resisted. Over time, there grew a tension in the Jewish community between the pro and anti-assimilationists. This tension has been a dynamic throughout Jewish history, the tension between tradition and change.
Okay, so there you have it. We've experienced repeatedly in history where, because we didn't have a homeland of our own, we lived among others with or without citizenship. And there was always this attraction of the outer culture versus resistance to the outer culture. And though we tend to think of Hanukkah as just a holiday about, fighting against the Syrian Greeks, as you'll see, it actually is a story about tension inside the Jewish community as well. Would someone read the next paragraph?
I would do that. Eventually, it became clear to the Syrian Greeks that assimilation was not proceeding as quickly as they wanted, so they began to force the Jews into submission. Not only were forms of Jewish practice outlawed, the Syrian Greek army took over the Jerusalem temple in 167 BCE and set up statues to use it for worship to the Greek pantheon. They proceeded to desecrate it by offering the sacrifice of a pig on an altar to Zeus.
So you can understand this was not a subtle intrusion. This was a full face-forward attempt to insult our ancestors, to desecrate our holiest place, at least in a physical sense, because I think really the holiest place is within the heart, but the temple being maybe a physical manifestation of that. And so they really went all out to make their position known. Would someone read the next paragraph, please?
Trouble then began on two fronts. The Jewish community was divided over Hellenization and almost at the point of civil war.
Hold on, Charles, 1 second. That is such an important part of the story that is usually lost, particularly in short shrift discussions about Hanukkah. And the way especially we describe it to children, we tend not to focus on the internal tensions in the Jewish community, but rather we focus more on the miracle and the legend and the lore than we necessarily do on the history itself. I'm sorry, so go ahead, please.
A strong resistance to Hellenistic tyranny emerged under the courageous urging of a Jewish Kohen, Matthias, and carried out by his 5 sons, led by Judah Maccabee. Eventually, a large-scale rebellion broke out against Antiochus IV, the Hellenistic king of the Seleucid Empire.
Thank you. And lastly, someone would read the end there. I'll read it. In the end, the Maccabees prevailed. The few overcame the many, beating the odds in a saga of resistance. This was just one of many times in history when the indomitable spirit of the Jewish people was victorious. Now, that's the history. Now let's talk about the lore. Would someone start up here at the top?
As the
Go ahead.
Who as the lore of Hanukkah goes, in the year 165 BCE, after beating back the Seleucids, the Maccabees set out to clean the Jerusalem temple and set it back up for Jewish worship. As Jewish tradition had taught, they wanted to have a formal dedication of the temple back to Jewish practice. The word for dedication in Hebrew is Hanukkah. Thus, the holiday gets its name. And as legend holds, when they took the one chalice of priestly certified oil to light the eternal light, the Ner Tamid, miraculously, the oil sufficient for a single day burned for 8 days. Upon this legend is our 8-day festival of Hanukkah derived.
Very good. So this is, I think, fascinating that whether it's a story or it's fact, I mean, it almost doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter. It's what it symbolizes. And it symbolizes that sometimes what we think is possible doesn't really reflect what ultimately turns out to be possible. And the other thing about this particular little reference is people don't always understand what it was they were lighting for the dedication, rededication of the temple back to Jewish worship. The common belief was, among many, that they lit the original menorah, which is a 7-stemmed candelabra that Moses is commanded to have built and placed in the ancient tabernacle and carried forward, and with the 7 stems. That is not what they set out to light. They set out to light the Ner Tamid, also one of the original biblical symbols for the tabernacle, for the Mishkan. And that eternal light was a single light, and it burned with, oil that was consecrated specifically for that purpose. And finally, I think it's worth mentioning, and I have colleagues who say, if we talk about Hanukkah in universalistic terms, we're giving up something to the non-Jewish culture. And then there are others who feel like, because of when Hanukkah falls in the winter, and because it is associated with the winter solstice, as we will see later, that this is a perfect opportunity to talk about the universalistic messages contained in the Hanukkah story, and that we can talk about it in both universalistic and Jewish terms. I don't know the answer to that debate, but I myself think that, this is an opportunity in our Jewish relationship with the outer world, to build a bridge of understanding in terms of common values. And Hanukkah is a perfect way to do that in some ways. So the story is important for all people. This is just my belief, because it's about religious freedom and self-determination. It's about the essence of liberty, namely freedom of thought and faith that are the inherent right of every person. Hanukkah is about standing up to tyranny in all forms. It's about our mutual responsibility across all faith traditions, ethnicities, races, creeds, abilities, or personal identities to defend the freedom of the mind. I will tell you that when I go to Washington, D.C., everybody has a favorite place. Mine happens to be the Jefferson Memorial. I mean, I love them all, but I love the Jefferson Memorial, just not only the way it stands out on the Potomac, but so many great quotes by Thomas Jefferson are embossed all around the memorial. And as Thomas Jefferson wrote in the original 1786 Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which I happen to think is just incredible for its time, Jefferson said, and it is written at the memorial, "Almighty God hath created the mind free." And the Hanukkah story, I think, is testimony to this fact and reminds us of the responsibility we all share to protect this fundamental truth. For Jews, Hanukkah is about tenacity in maintaining our identity, especially in the face of those who would squelch and even attempt to destroy it. And as we sit here together, we know Anti-Semitism is growing daily around the globe. And when I say daily, I mean daily. In tumultuous and uncertain times, Jews have been scapegoats, and yet again in our time, we are targets. I do want to mention, we had an event here this past week and had an Israeli speaker join us for this evening, Wednesday. And he grew up in England, and he said something I thought that was sadly true and quite stunning. He said, growing up in England, there was always an anti-Jewish sentiment in England, always. And it was palpable, he said, growing up. And it reflected really the anti-Jewish sentiment that is palpable across Europe. He said, Jews, there's a reason why Jews are leaving France, and the largest numbers ever. There are reasons why Jews in Britain are beginning to question their safety. And European anti-Semitism, right, is as old as anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism, really. The point he made is that, and his concern is that the level of outward expressions of anti-Semitism in the United States, as it has continued to grow. I just heard a report yesterday that the ADL said anti-Semitic acts, I think, went up 26% in the last year in the United States. And this speaker was suggesting that what we really have to watch out for is not allowing what has happened in Europe with widespread, dominant anti-Semitism embedding itself into the culture. We have to do everything we can to prevent that from happening here in the United States. So I feel that last line, Hanukkah fuels our dedication to preserve our Jewish civilization. So up to this point, any comments on that? Any of that? Wait, let me bring everybody. There you are.
Well, I don't want to diverge too much, but I will mention, just kind of echoing what you're saying, the temple, we just happened to get an email yesterday, as a matter of fact, from a synagogue in France. They reached out to us, and they're reaching out to other synagogues, I think, across the country here, asking for help because of the anti-Semitism that they're facing. It is so open. The families, people are having to actually move, and they're, anyway, so they were asking for our help to help support their synagogue and help these families. I thought that was pretty stunning.
For sure.
Yeah.
What kind of help? Monetary help, or what kind of help are they asking for?
Yeah, they're asking for monetary help. I mean, I'm happy to share this email with anybody that's interested. It's talking about the security issues that they've been facing due to the anti-Semitism there. This is in a region north of Paris. They're talking about attacks and aggression on, people in the streets and in their homes, and how dangerous it's becoming. So they're trying, I'm not sure I quite understand this, but it has to do with trying to take ownership of their synagogue. I guess they haven't owned it before, but anyway, I don't want to take too much time with it. Yeah, but
France has been a problem for years.
Yes, it has.
There have been sections of France north of Paris where the police simply will not go because it is controlled by Islamic fundamentalists.
Yeah.
I don't want us to really dwell on the topic because we have a lot of more material to learn together. But I do think that Hanukkah is about our dedication to maintaining our Jewish identity in what is too often a hostile world, and to believe in ourselves, to believe in our Jewish selves. And we will have, I think, an eternal conversation in Jewish life about, whether we should stay under the radar as a Jewish community or just be open and gracious and loving in the world, and do all we can to break down misconceptions about who Jews are. I think you all, many of you know me well enough by now that I've always been of the belief that Jewish, non-Jewish interfaith dialogue, building relationships with the non-Jewish community, forging partnerships with the non-Jewish community is one among many important aspects of our security. And I think, Hanukkah, part of the subtext there is a reminder of that. And I think you'll see in just a moment a number of aspects why Hanukkah is about Judaism in the world, not Judaism in our hearts. Just a couple more, just some other messages that I'm sure you know. We take note of the Hanukkah candle that lights the others, called the shamash, of course. And every Jew and every person has the privilege to be a shamash in our own circles of life and to live out the essential Jewish ideal that giving is the way to receive. You can be a shamash that can extinguish the darkness through empathy and caring, and giving and sharing your blessings with others. That is why the Jewish people. I want to ask you a grammatical question. Do you say the Jewish people is or the Jewish people are?
Or is.
People is everyone. It should be our, I
It's
think.
collective.
It's collective.
It's a collective one. It's a collective one. That's why I chose is. I don't know. You could look at it, many ways, but here we are splitting hairs again. It's all right. Yeah, I think it could go both ways, but I think if we were talking about Jewish people are in a generic sense, but the Jewish people is one. So anyway, just another little ditty for us to wonder about. But we're called Or LaGoyim, a light to the nations, and we obviously we act as a light to the nations in a whole variety of ways. So now I want to talk about Hanukkah in popular culture. Hanukkah was never intended to be a mimic of Christmas with gift giving, etc. Children were given gelt, coins, and guess what? Why were they given coins? Because the elders said to the children, if you go study Torah for an hour, I'll pay you money. And yeah, maybe that sounds a little toward, maybe it's not, I don't know. But I think it's it's indicative of the fact that, what's the front line response to maintaining our civilization? And the answer in our history has always been study, learning, developing the mind. It's worth noting the gift giving began really in the 20th century when Jewish children were feeling left out and influenced by seasonal marketeers. I can tell you, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood in Brookline, Massachusetts, with a neighborhood synagogue, and there were Christians in my elementary school, but the Jews were a majority, and Baker School in Chestnut Hill, Mass. And I never had Christmas. I mean, we had nothing, certainly not a Hanukkah bush or anything like that. The closest I ever got to something related to Christmas is I got to invite like 3 other friends over for Christmas Eve to sleep at the house. But there was nothing Christmas about it. It was just, what does a Jew do on Christmas? Invites other Jews to come sleep over. I mean, I don't know. Or eat Chinese food or whatever it is we've developed to cope with the Christmas experience. But it was never intended to become the cultural mimic of what happens in the commercial part of Christmas whatsoever. However, having said that, now we get to see one of the greatest parodies of this ever done. Well. So the reason I play that, it's irreverent, obviously. I play it because on the one hand, I think it's hilarious. And on the other hand, I think it's upsetting. It's hilarious, so take it just for what it is. And I always love to watch it every year. But part of it makes me cringe just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because he really is articulating the real cultural pressures that a lot of Jewish people feel at this time of year. And I remember in my earlier rabbinical life, the big new program we used to put together back in the day called the Hanukkah Christmas Dilemma. Right? And we would gather and we would discuss, what does it feel like to be Jewish at Christmas time? How do you deal with this in an interfaith family? How do we maintain our Jewishness, but also not be standoffish in the outer culture at this time of year? Should we be offended if someone says Merry Christmas to us and correct them and say, sorry, I'm Jewish. Don't say that. Do we accept the notion that we should just become generic and just say happy holidays? All those kinds of questions are actually contained in that piece that he wrote. And the notion that the way Jews should feel better about feeling like outsiders during the Hanukkah season is by recognizing all the famous Jews out there. And I think that I thank him for writing that, because maybe even unbeknownst to him, in a interesting way, he captures a lot of the dynamic tension that exists at this time of year for some people in the Jewish community. And so any reaction to that?
Yeah, it was a little hard to watch.
It feels a little awkward.
Yeah.
And also remember, that goes back, I believe, to 1979.
Oh, wow.
And so think of how our social norms, standards of communication, the way we talk about identity, everything else has changed in all this time. I don't know if people will watch it now and it's like a reminiscence to watch. But if he were to come out with that today, I'm not sure how it would be received. Probably not well.
But at the time, it was hysterical.
At the time, in a time of different cultural standards, and it's just interesting. Okay, so popular Hanukkah customs. You know these: eating oily foods from the oil in the lamp, latkes and sufganiyot, jelly donuts, lighting of the Hanukkah menorah, the Hanukkah, which of course has 9 stems, every night, and placing it so it can be seen from the street to advertise the miracle. And people say, really, you're supposed to put it out for everybody to see? Wouldn't that attract negative attention? And this young man who spoke on Wednesday night said, in England, Jews never put their menorahs out to be seen on the street. They put them on the stove in the back of the house. He said, and we all knew we were supposed to put them out in the front, but it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the possibility that someone would throw eggs at our house. But according to the tradition, should be seen from the street to advertise the miracle. And then playing dreidel, of course, which was like, according to the legend, was a diversionary game played by our ancestors to divert the attention of the Syrian Greek soldiers. And the dreidel has the letters Nun, Gimel, He, Shin, Neska, representing Nes Gadol Haya Sham, a great miracle happened there. For your information, dreidels in Israel are made differently. In Israel, it's Nun, Gimel, He, and the letter Pei. Nes Gadol Haya Po, a great miracle happened here. And then we have, again, in terms of popular culture, to me, this is in a sense, the ultimate attempt to mollify some folks in the Jewish community. I'm going to pull this up. I couldn't believe this. I didn't even know this. There are 5 versions of a poem called The Night Before Hanukkah. 'Twas the night before Hanukkah, boychicks and maidels, not a sound could be heard, not even the dreidels. The menorah was set on the chimney alight, in the kitchen the bubba hut geshabt a bite, salami, pastrami, glass latte, the pickles with bagels, oy vey, gesund geschmack, the Kinderlach felt while dreaming of Taglach and Hanukkah Gelt. And it goes on and on and on and on. And the very end, more rapid than eagles, his prancers they came as he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Izzy, now Morris, now Yitzhak, now Sammy, now Irving and Maxie and Moshe and Manny. He gave a geschrei as he drove out of sight. Guten Yontif to all, and to all a good night. So here we have 5. You can just look up 5 versions. Was the night before Hanukkah. You can see it online, all of them. They're all different variations of the basic theme. What would cause anyone, to write such a thing?
Because it's part of Christmasizing Hanukkah.
Yes, it sure is.
I dislike that very much. I dislike the gift giving because I did not grow up with that tradition as you didn't in your neighborhood, but I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. And I just cringe when I see all this Christmasizing Hanukkah, the gifts. I was very surprised, and helped me understand. I always thought Chabad was very traditional, but I think of very Jewish, very traditional, and yet they have a women's gift exchange. So I don't understand their gift exchange, nor do I participate in any of that.
I think that there will always be inherently within the Jewish psyche, the only place in the world really where it would be less obvious would be living in Israel, in a place that is governed and defined by the Jewish calendar, by Jewish ideas around time, Hebrew being the primary language. But as long as we live in Galut, as long as there are Jews in the diaspora, there's always going to be some among us, and I prefer not to judge them, but to be empathic, who are going to be deferential in some ways to the outer society. And if it's going along to get along, there are all kinds of reasons why people may do things like that. Like writing a poem, what would move someone to write these poems? It's partly to be cute, it's partly to be funny, but if there was a way to psychoanalyze those kinds of processes, I'm trained as a psychoanalyst, so I try to understand what's underlying, what's the unconscious need being fulfilled by writing a poem like that. And I think it has something to do with, just understanding where we fit in the world, where Jews fit in the world. I don't think it's a sin that they wrote those poems. I think they're cute in a way, but I also think Mordecai Kaplan said it best. When he wrote Judaism as a Civilization, he talked about that in the age of modernity, Jews will always have their feet in two civilizations simultaneously: a secular, democratic, open society, and which is a civilization unto itself, and a Jewish civilization. And the challenge for Jewish survival is figuring out how to navigate that. And the notion that we're living in two civilizations simultaneously in the Jewish psyche, I think, is very easy to understand. Because think about it, we have a Jewish homeland, we have a Jewish state, but the biggest quagmire about Jewish identity in the minds of non-Jews is that we have this international, universal loyalty to each other, no matter where we live. And we have a term, the Jewish people, which means wherever we are, everywhere, we are still all connected. And of course, some people twist that and say, and that's why they have a world conspiracy. But that's nonsense. But we do have a connection. In Hebrew, we call it Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael, the collective of all of Israel everywhere. And I think Kaplan was saying, if you want to live like a monastic life, which Jews are not prone to do, you want to cut yourself off from the outer world, you can, and then not have to bother with the intrusions of all the non-Jewish aspects of life. But what Kaplan was saying, which is why what he said was so novel and important at the time, he said, it's actually because we have feet in two civilizations simultaneously. That's what's actually enabled us to survive. It's taught us adaptability. We've taken the best from other cultures and drawn them in and put them through the sifting of the Jewish mind and come out with Jewish expressions that are unique to our people and our civilization. And we've done that throughout. I mean, let's take something as fundamental as it gets as a core of Jewish experience and civilization, our calendar, our Jewish calendar, borrowed from Mesopotamia. We've always managed to live well, do as well as we can in every place we've ever lived, in every civilization we've ever encountered. And Kaplan's argument is it's because of that ability, integrative, synthetic way of thinking that reflects the Jewish psyche, why we have 3 Jews and 6 opinions, why we can sit around and debate Talmud 24 hours straight and it feels like a minute went by. It's that intellectual, psychic, inclusive worldview is what he says the reason we actually have survived all this time. So if we just lived, it's a really interesting question. If we just lived in an isolated crucible and Judaism weren't part of the world, I wonder what that would end up looking like. So anyway, these are all themes related to Hanukkah. That's why I think it's such an interesting holiday. So now what I want to do is I just want to spend a little time looking at some primary sources with you. This is one of my favorites. So there's some midrash suggesting that Hanukkah is actually mentioned in the first few verses of the Torah. So if we go to the beginning of the Torah, we have Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. We've studied in this group different ways to interpret and translate that opening sentence, but we'll just take the most common for now. In the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth, or we could read when God began to create, or we can read with Reshit God created with the mind or with the Torah, whatever. And then the second line, now the earth was v'ha'aretz hayata tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tohom v'ruach Elohim mirachefet. I love that word. This mirachefet means, and the Spirit of God was, I think of mirachefet was dancing. The Spirit of God was dancing on the face of the waters, and often translated as hovering. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. In the Hebrew, Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or, Vayehi Or. And it's interesting, one early interpretation is the word Yehi right here. If we look at the numerical value of the letters, and Hebrew letters have numerical value, depending on where they fall in the order of the alphabet. We call this gematria. It's an aspect of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism. I find it interesting, fascinating. I don't live by it, but I think it's indicative of the various levels of symbolization we have in our approach to the Torah. And if we look at this word, Yehi, the Yud stands for 10. It's the 10th letter. The Hey is the 5th letter, and the Yud is the 10th letter. So the numerical value of the word Yehi is 25. And the next word is light. And so you have sort of hidden inside here on below the level of, we say, the Peshat, which is the surface of the letters, what we read, what you see. There's, we go deeper to the deeper levels. And you remember there's the Peshat, the Drash, the Remez, and the Sod, which we represent by the word Pardes. This also means 25 light. And there is, a goodly amount of material written about this, that it's referring to Hanukkah occurring on the 25th day of the month of Kislev. And so the notion that Hanukkah is somehow connected with creation, we could have a very interesting conversation about that. But the notion of, it's not just about God speaking and creating light, right? Remember, I taught you about the word abracadabra. Abracadabra, abracadabra. Abracadabra is actually a Hebrew word. Abara kedabara. Abara, I create kedabara as I speak. And that's referring in a Kabbalistic sense, God spoke and there was light. So creation was an act, it was a verbal act in part, at least the way the Torah represents it. And contained in that is then this other level of meaning. And this light that was created is associated something with the 25th. And there you have it. Hanukkah happens on the 25th of Kislev. And of course, the interesting, strange confluence, Christmas occurs on the 25th as well. There's a long actual history behind that. But there's also other literature that talks about Hanukkah, like Christmas, in fact, as actually having more to do with primordial light. And what does the winter solstice represent? It represents the decline of light and then the reemergence of light. And there is actually midrashic material that teaches that in the Gan Eden story, when Adam and Eve were presumably on the wrong side of God's will, that when they were punished and put outside the garden, that also what happened at that time is the days started getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, which really frightened them. They didn't understand. So they began to burn fires to offset the darkness. And then eventually the light came back. And so there's a lot of interesting levels of interpretation for this. The second text I want to show you is actually from Josephus, the great Hellenistic historian who lived from 37, the Common Era, to somewhere circa around 100 of the Common Era. And he he has a reference, says the king, being thereto disposed beforehand, complied with them and came upon the Jews with a great army and took their city by force and slew a great multitude of those that favored Ptolemy and sent out his soldiers to plunder them without mercy. And he spoiled the temple and put a stop to the constant practice of offering a daily sacrifice of expiation for 3 years and 6 months. So when we talk about the whole story of resistance to Hanukkah, we have a variety of historical sources that refer to it. We also have what's known as the Scroll of Antiochus. It's actually, clearly not a Jewish text, deriving from the 5th to 7th century. And it refers to the cleaning up of the temple when the Jews managed to retake it for Jewish worship. After this, the sons of Israel went up to the temple and rebuilt its gates and purified the temple from the dead bodies and from the defilement. And they sought after pure olive oil to light the lamps therewith, but could not find any except one bowl that was sealed with the signet ring of the high priest from the days of Samuel the prophet, and they knew it was pure. There was in it enough oil to light the lamps therewith for 1 day, but the God of heaven, whose name dwells there, put therein his blessing, and they were able to light it from it 8 days. Therefore, the sons of Hashmonai made this covenant and took upon themselves a solemn vow, they and the sons of Israel, all of them, to publish amongst the sons of Israel to the end of time, that they might observe these 8 days of joy and honor as the days of feasts written in the book of the law, even to light in them, so as to make known to those who come after them that their God wrought for them salvation from heaven. In them it is not permitted to mourn, neither to decree a fast on those days during the 8 days of Hanukkah, and anyone who has a vow to perform, let him perform it. Very interesting reference here, of course, describing what we know in our own legendary past. Interesting that this is deriving more than likely from a non-Jewish source. And then from the Babylonian Talmud, in Shabbat, page 21, second page, 21b, the mitzvah of Hanukkah is, this is interesting. The mitzvah of Hanukkah is a candle for a man and his household. So really, the original commandment was you just had to light one light, which for some people would have been a huge undertaking. But it goes on and said, but those who enhance, meaning the Mehadrin, the more observant among you, light one candle for each person. And those who really enhance, Mehadrin, Minha Mehadrin, meaning the pious of the pious, Beit Shammai says, on the first day, one lights 8, and from then on, one continues to decrease. And Beit Hillel says, on the first day, one lights 1, and from then on, one continues to increase. We have talked about this past years, that 2 traditions, you start with 8 lights, and you take one away every night. And Shammai's interpretation was suggesting that that actually shows the reality of the miracle. The oil became less every night, but the light continued. Hillel takes it conversely and says we show the increase of the miracle by increasing the amount of light versus acknowledging the decrease of the oil. So 2 different perspectives. And then we have from Megillat Ta'anit, talks about Kislev, say rabbinic commentary, on the 25th of the month is Hanukkah, 8 days on which one does not eulogize. So we don't give a hesped on Hanukkah eulogy. We have funeral during those days, because when the Greeks entered the temple, they defiled all the oil there. When the hand of the Hasmoneans was made strong, they defeat the Greeks. They checked in the temple and only found one jar, blah, blah, blah. There was only enough for it to light one day, blah, blah, blah. The following year, they decreed these to be 8 days of celebration. And then we have the traditional prayer that we add on all 8 days of Hanukkah, and also during the service, and it's also added to Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after meals, during the 8 days of Hanukkah. And would someone like to read this? And this is right from the Siddur.
Yeah.
I will do it.
Thank you.
And is that where I begin?
Thank
Yes, please.
And we thank you for the miracles, for the redemption, for the mighty deeds, for the saving acts, and for the wonders which you have wrought for our ancestors in those days at this time. In the days of Mattiyahu, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Hasmonean, and his sons, when the wicked Hellenic government rose up against your people, Israel, to make them forget your Torah and violate the decrees of your will. But you, in your abounding mercies, stood by them in the time of their distress. You waged their battles, defended their rights, and avenged the wrong done to them. You delivered the mighty into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the wanton sinners into the hands of those who occupy themselves with your Torah. You made a great and holy name for yourself in your world and effected a great deliverance and redemption for your people Israel to this very day. Then your children entered the shrine of your house, cleansed your temple, purified your sanctuary, kindled lights in your holy courtyards, and instituted these 8 days of Hanukkah to give thanks and praise to your great name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much. So I wonder how you feel about this. You know, we sing it. To me, it's like a perfect example of history being written by the victors in some sense. If you wanted to take a piece of writing and say, you know, the writers had a very strong purpose in what they said here. Number one, God acts in history. God acts in and through history, which in of itself is a controversial statement, right? Not only is history often not only written by victors, but history that is written by the victors is usually what gets the most attention. And that in of itself is a challenging idea. That may not be necessarily fair or true. The second thing about this is that if you believe God acts in history, and we're all free to believe that, then what is our response to religious extremists who act with violence and, you know, and do so in the name of God, believing the God of history is on their side? And when I know if I talk to my daughter who's 26 and her fiance, and by the way, next time I see you, they're going to be getting married New Year's Eve, the end of December. So, and they were here over Thanksgiving, and they've asked me to perform their wedding. And I said to my daughter, Sarah, I said, couldn't I just want to be a dad that day? And she said, no, you're the only rabbi I know and trust. So I'm going to have the pleasure of doing that. I'll probably only cry 5 times. And it'll be beautiful, but I talked to them, you know, just about their Jewish life, etc. And it's interesting. They're both proud to be Jewish. They want to raise a Jewish family. But they have a lot of ambivalence about the idea of the God of history. That's where they struggle, like that God takes sides in human wars. And that, you know, there's a great, you know, one of the great lines in a Crosby, Stills, Nash song. Too many people have died in the name of Christ. You know, too many people have died in the name of God, too many people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, you know, people who are acting with their belief of a God in history. I don't disbelieve in a God in history. My mind is too feeble to understand what that actually means. I'm agnostic about that question. And I've taught you many times, there's an inherent agnosticism at the heart of Jewish faith. It's a healthy agnosticism. But here, this is as confident, declarative statement of Judaism's belief for some, or I shouldn't say Judaism's belief, a stream of thought within Judaism that talks about God acting in history. And we all have to wrestle with it. What do the rest of you think?
Well,
Yeshem, go ahead.
I believe that all life is part of God, and that all life is essentially, and I would like to think, in God's eyes, sacred. However, there are people who will, you know, use God as a divisive force, and I think it's human polemics and human hunger for power. I don't believe that, you know, declarations made by the victors, of course, are easier to accept because they're alive and they're in power. But I have a hard time with that. I have a hard time believing that God is only on the sides, or it's written, you know, but God is only brought into a history by the victors. I have a hard time with that. That's just how I see it, I guess.
You know, go ahead. Who's going to say something?
Well, me? No, somebody else, I think.
I
You know,
I agree with you.
Go ahead.
Yes, Shim, I agree with that sentiment. And I guess when I see this, I mean, it calls up other prayers that you know, you see you know, in a lot, even in the weekly Shabbat services, I feel like there's like this undercurrent going through, you know, thanking God for, you know, for doing certain things and being on our side and all that. And it to me, it just seems like it's so much of our human filtering. It's just our feeble, let's use that word, feeble way of understanding. You know, we're just trying to make sense of the world, but I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does to me.
Look, let's remember way back and a long time ago, a couple of years ago, easily, we studied when we were studying the documentary hypothesis about the possibility, the documentary theory that the Torah is an edited, redacted collection of a variety of streams of thought and authorship. And we looked at an example that I think very nicely illustrates this notion, not only of multiple authorship, but you talk about human polemic. And let's not forget the story of Noah that we looked at. Noah comes off the ark, and we read that very strange set of passages, terse little end of the story of Noah. And we discovered there's a redaction right in the middle of those final verses about Noah. And it's that whole story about, you know, he gets drunk and he has sexually illicit behavior back in the tent. And then it says, you know, Ham, the father of Canaan, goes in and sees his father and then comes out and gossips to his brothers. And then the brothers walk backwards into the tent and put Noah to bed.
Yeah.
And then it says Noah wakes up from his wine, which is great idiom in the Hebrew, and wakes up from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done, and then comes out of the tent and says, "Cursed be Canaan." Now understand, Canaan isn't even born yet. Canaan's not, not born. So then you're saying, well, why doesn't he curse Ham? Why does he curse the grandchild not yet born? Because now this is the theory at work, because the writer, that vignette, that little tiny, piece of Torah probably derived from a much later time than the time of Noah, probably derived from an oral tradition at the time the Israelites were preparing to try to take over the land of Canaan. And what did we imagine the night before the big invasion? All the Israeli troops, people were gathered, and their leaders got up, and to bolster them, to give them the courage and the strength of will to go forward with the battle, we're going to tell you about the Canaanites. The Canaanites have been bad since the time of Noah. The Canaanites were cursed all the way back as far as Noah. The Canaanites, the Canaanites, the Canaanites. And eventually, to preserve that polemic, a true political polemic, it makes its way over the course of history, and it gets planted by a writer, or maybe a group of writers, or maybe a single redactor or editor. We don't know. But that little story that becomes significant later on in the Canaanite occupation, they needed to give it a home. They needed to give it a literary and historical home so they could authenticate the badness of the Canaanites. So they use the Noah story and they plug it in right there. There's an example, in our own culture, in our own literary history, of a very strong polemic. Talk about, I think it's very manipulative. They're going to show the Canaanites are bad of bad, by having Noah curse the grandchild that isn't born yet. That's like making the anti-Canaanite sentiment really deep. It was so deep that in Noah's unconscious, before his grandson's even born, he knew the Canaanites are these terrible, terrible folks, And just think about all the machination, all the intellect, command of the language, dialectical thinking that had to go into constructing just that little tiny polemic in the midst of the Noah story. Point being is that, humans have a great proclivity to polemic, and our people are not innocent of that either. And it's a very interesting conversation. And, and as the rabbis would say, they'd say, well, we don't have an answer, but l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, we'll debate it anyway. Finally, we just have a few more minutes. I always like to do this because it's fun, I have a little Hanukkah quiz. And let's see how you do. I like to end this on an upbeat tone. So let's start right here. Am I in the right spot? Oops. Here we go. Hanukkah is known as Festival of Lights, Holiday of Rededication, the Jewish Christmas, the Yiddish Ramadan.
All of the above.
All of the above. Okay.
Festival
The heroes
Festival
of the
of Lights.
holiday of Hanukkah lived ancient Palestine, ancient Israel, the occupied territories, the liberated territories, a 3-floor walk up in Jerusalem.
Occupied territories.
Ancient Israel.
Palestine.
The Jews of the time of the first Hanukkah worshipped at the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, at a less holy temple about 10 miles west of Jerusalem, wherever they could get high holiday tickets, all of the above. Temple in Jerusalem. Suddenly, a new cruel leader, what else is new, came to power in Syria. His name was
Antiochus.
Antiochus. This evil leader abruptly commanded the Jews of his kingdom to become idol worshipers. There arose a brave elder among the Jewish people who helped to lead a revolt against the Syrians, whose name was Matityahu in Hebrew. Very good. All right. Matityahu, that's the answer, number 6, had sons by the names of whom?
Judah.
Judah, I'm not sure of the others, and that is true. The last name of this glorious family was
Maccabee.
Maccabee. The town in which the heroic family lived was
Dean.
Modin. Very good. The name Maccabee translates to mean hammer, because the Maccabees hammered the Syrian army. Where did the Jews fight the Syrians? Netanya, good. After how many long and agonizing battles, the Jews defeated their oppressors? The final score of the war was Maccabees 613. That's the number of our commandments, of our mitzvah. Okay, we're almost done with this nonsense. In order to purify the holy temple, the Jews had to
Get some oil.
get some oil. You got it. The oil the Maccabees found was sufficient for only
One day.
very good. There was a great miracle as the oil used for re-sanctifying the temple ended up lasting
8 days.
12 days, but for you 8. That's just a Yiddishism. One of the great coincidences of history is
25th day of Kislev.
got it. Among the Talmudic rulings on this holiday is that the lamp must be lit at sunset. The lamp should be placed outside the entrance of one's house. The lamp should be set on a window nearest the street. Your fire insurance should be paid up. Hanukkah used to be the day before Tu B'Shvat, but the rabbis moved it to avoid forest fires.
I guess C, nearest the street.
But at sunset.
Lamp must be lit at sunset,
No.
yes. Jewish women are obligated to also kindle the Hanukkah lamp because they were included in the
Threatening to
miracle
pick
according to the tractate. Yeah. All right. One of the major debates in the Talmud involves
Oh, the first one, House of Shammai.
Yep. It's A and B. But because Hanukkah is considered such a joyous holiday, Jews are
Cover their neighbor's Jerusalem.
it's A and B. The special Al Hanisim prayer is added to religious services and grace after meal during the 8th day of Hanukkah. It translates as
Thanks for the miracles.
thanks for the miracles. A long accepted tradition of Jews around the world is for the parents to give their children
Hanukkah guilt.
A and B.
Jewish guilt. No. On the holiday of Hanukkah, millions of Jews over the world
In the dreidel.
spin the dreidel. And we really have to do something about assimilation, which is what the Maccabean revolt was all about. And to finish, take any final comments. I found this quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs that I think is just very nice. There always were two ways to live in a world that is often dark and full of tears. We can curse the darkness, or we can light a light. And as the Hasidim say, a little light drives out much darkness. May we all help light. May we all help light up the world. There you have it. Any, in the few minutes we have, because we're going to stop at just about 1:30, any comments, thoughts?
This was beautiful, especially ended on that note about lighting. Yeah, darkness.
Would you share the Hanukkah quiz with us? A copy of it?
Be happy to.
And Nancy, just so you know, if you ever want to go back, we're recording these Torah studies, and they are on our YouTube channel. So you can
Very
always go
good.
find them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you all for being so attentive and participating, and as we always do together. I really appreciate all of you.
It's been our pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for doing this. We
This
always
was
learn.
Thank you for teaching us such wonderful things every time.
And
About-
all fresh perspective, not a sort of rote, kind of catechism, like the way it's supposed to be and the way it is. There's always nuances. And I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
It's the consequence of a mind that rarely shuts down. So
Well, it's a gift. I mean,
We're the beneficiaries.
well, I have been too, and there'll be more to come. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing about what you learned from other wonderful teachers. And Rabbi Zoe, welcome, and look forward to your teaching this group and leading this group and helping them expand their awareness of
Of
Yahadut,
whatever comes out, right?
whatever comes out, exactly.
Yes.
Whatever comes out, exactly.
Well, Toda Rabah.
maybe I can just fill in because some of the people weren't online yet when we mentioned this earlier. But in case you may not have caught on our emails, we're going to be, I guess, expanding a little bit. We're going to be inviting what we're calling a collective of voices. So some additional rabbis and speakers will be joining the mix. And so, for example, in January, Rabbi Schlachter, Jack Schlachter, will be giving the Torah study. And that's actually going to be January 14th at 2 p.m. Mountain, which I know changes up our time frame for that month. But we had to do it that way. And in February, Rabbi Zoe, who's with us right now, is going to give the Torah study. That's February 4th at 10 a.m., back to our normal time at 10. So, we will be having the opportunity to hear from other rabbis and as well have Rabbi Lennick join us as well at times, during the coming year. So we're going to be posting everything on the website. We have a schedule. I don't know how many of you see that or not online, or if you just rely on the emails, but we'll try to keep up with both. So, you're all aware of what's going on. So just to
Well,
let you
thank
know.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, Rabbi, every single time it's been so wonderful. I mean, I feel like I've always learned so much from every single one of your Torah studies. It's been just a gift, and we appreciate it immensely.
Well, we create together, and that's what makes it really, really special. So thank you.
Well, that's part of the whole thing. You said together, rather than you preaching to us. We've been participating.
I'm just going to mention this because it just popped into my head. Some of you may know and some of you may not, but Rabbi is coming to Colorado in a couple of weeks. He will be participating in an event with Colorado Public Radio. And it's on December 15th. They're doing a live holiday event. And he's going to be representing Temple Aaron and Judaism more broadly in Colorado. And so, you actually can go to the event in person. Neil and I will be there to watch, but if you can't make it to Denver for that, you can hear it online as well. And I will make sure to post it, when it's available. But I would encourage you to listen, because I'm sure the rabbi's going to do a great job, and I look forward to it.
Hope so.
And it'll be fun too. It's a really fun program that they're doing.
And thank you, Sherry, for what you do.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I enjoy it. So,
All right, well, stay well, everybody.
thank you.
Shabbat
I-
shalom. I'm gonna have to
Shabbat
go.
Shalom.
Shalom.
So,
Well, everybody. Love to you all.
Mazel
Happy Hanukkah.
daughter and son-in-law.